Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this out there on the World Wide Web. This is Jeremy Geelan for SYS-CON TV with our next Cloud Computing Power Panel. We're here in our Times Square studio, as ever, joined by four people who I've kind of kidnapped from going to 10th Cloud Expo. They can't start that till tomorrow. So let's find out who's joining us in the studio, starting, if we may, with you, Andy.
Great. Good day. Andy Schroepfer, VP of Enterprise Strategy at Rackspace Hosting. We are the service leader in cloud and hosting infrastructure focused on open technologies. Thanks for having us.
See, short and sweet. Allyson Klein is up next.
Allyson Klein, Director of Leadership Marketing at Intel Corporation, also the lead marketing rep for the Open Data Center Alliance.
Dual hats. We like
Yes,
that. Almost like we've got five of us. Henry, sir.
Henry Fastert, I'm the Chief Technologist and Managing Partner at SHI. SHI's cloud is targeted at mission-critical computing.
And Ash.
Ash Massoudi, CEO and co-founder of NextAxiom. We develop a silo-free development and integration environment so you can build applications in the cloud against the on-premise applications without having to move them to the cloud.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, as I say, for joining us out there. 10th Cloud Expo starts tomorrow, so you'd think, I've seen some tweets saying, does that mean it's all been around 10 years? Let's not go into that, but we're talking a number of years now. And you are all, in the course of this panel, I'm sure, going to tell us all the good things. So I hope you don't mind me just switching the points a little and saying, what is the least understood? We're in the business of communicating about cloud computing, so are you all, as well as supplying it. What is the least understood aspect of cloud computing, Ash? Let's get rid of some of this stuff. What would you say it is?
Well, I think, infrastructure as a service has got a lot of attention so far, so that's pretty well understood.
Right.
And that's when we virtualize physical servers and make it easy to provision them. Like Amazon has done a great job in doing that. Also, software as a service is somewhat understood. We pay by the drink, pay as you go, and it has multi-tenancy and other things to make it possible for the vendor to do it.
Okay.
What's misunderstood is, not misunderstood, but not as much, it hasn't got as much attention, is the middle part, the programming paradigm and the application development infrastructure that's required for the cloud to be fully utilized to its capacity.
So what are we going to do? What are we going to do to spread light and lightness?
Well, I think we're getting there now. I mean, we're realizing that to fuel the cloud, we got to come up with applications. It's really business computing. Cloud computing is about business computing. And if you look at it, there are three aspects of the cloud. One is the pay-by-the-drink aspect that differentiates the cloud computing. Another one is location transparency. That's about, it doesn't matter where the server or the application is. And the same things have to apply to the middle layer, to a programming paradigm. So now new programming paradigms are emerging, and I think the attention is going to be there for the rest of this decade. I think that's going to get way more attention.
Well, we'll soon see. Let's try that out. Any takers for that? So that middle layer. Henry, you with Ash on that?
I am, but there's another concept that I want to introduce around this.
I knew there'd be another concept because Henry Fastert is full of other concepts.
Well, I think the least understood aspect of the cloud is that it is the tool that we're going to use in corporate IT to close what is now starting to be called the expectation gap.
Whoa, wow, hang on. Just say that again, real slow. I like that.
So
it's the tool
that corporate IT is going to use to close the expectation gap.
That's nice, okay.
So people are very used to the services that you now receive from external IT, the level of interactivity, the level of integration. If you go back 10 years ago, the best user interfaces, levels of integrations you received from corporate IT, you did not receive from external IT. Over the last couple of years, that dynamic is changing and changing pretty rapidly. And so it's cloud computing that's going to give corporate IT the time necessary to focus their activities on improving that user experience and matching and exceeding the experience that customers are now getting from their internal customers are getting from external IT.
Allyson, make sense?
I think it does make sense. I think that there's the opportunity that comes with that is the amount of time that IT has to free up by moving to the cloud to focus on innovation rather than management of existing services. And I think that that's going to be a very interesting next wave of cloud computing when we get to that point. And we think that we're in the tipping point of it right now, broad-scale cloud adoption in the enterprise for 2012. What happens when IT takes advantage of this added efficiency and actually has cycles to put on things like growth of data and new opportunities for business analytics? Those types of opportunities, I think, are going to be heard about a lot this week.
For sure.
And I think that's something that I'm looking forward to hearing about what others in the industry and end customers are thinking about in this space.
Andy, business. We're hearing Rackspace's experience, business.
Well, it's over the last year. There's been this concept of comparing big IT to big web. I forget who actually first
Big
invented
web,
that
yeah.
framing. But as we look at the Fortune 100 type customers that are choosing Rackspace, they're either of that big web mentality. They were acquired as a web startup, or they were in charge of a web initiative at their firm. And then as their initiative becomes more important to the corporation, or as it scales to being a spend size, big IT then comes in. And not that they have wanted to shun this. This last year, I think, was very good for the maturity of cloud understanding inside the enterprises. But now there's that political fight of, wow, you're rising the ranks and you're going to potentially be in control of IT. So the company as a whole seems to be supporting all these web initiatives, embracement of cloud. But I think the political battle is starting to be visible to the firms that are getting selected for the different cloud initiatives. And one of those key things is this understanding of the liability responsibility. If you're going to a cloud, there's either providers that will say, there is no liability coverage for you, do whatever you want with your data at your own risk, and there's limitations to the applications and adoption that will happen in cloud if that's where it sticks. So I love that we're getting to the point of mutual understanding. Here is the data I'm planning on bringing here. Here is the risk coverage and tolerance I have, and let that big web, big IT battle start to shape in an appropriate way.
Would you go so far as saying, is that for you the main barrier at the moment?
The main barrier. It's still getting people to want to embrace details of what is the data they're going to bring there. There's so many applications that get brought to the table for all of us to consider, and it's so late in the process that they're willing to reveal, okay, here is what the actual data I'll do there. Because otherwise it's just a test dev exercise, and the world and the next customers all want to hear what's production on your different clouds.
Allyson, put on your ODCA hat, your Open Data Center Alliance hat.
Yeah.
Presumably, that's one of the things ODCA is incredibly focused on, is this idea of interop and all the rest of it.
Interop, open solutions. I think that what customers are saying is that they want to make sure that their choice now doesn't lock them into something 3 years from now.
Right.
They want to be able to ensure that from infrastructure to services to the way the market works in terms of engaging with providers, that there's a level playing field, that they're able to choose solutions based on differentiated features rather than lock-in.
Right. So this sort of future-proofing is coming out of that.
Exactly.
Sort of thought. You won't have to reinvent the wheel. Similar story, Henry? Is that what you're seeing from your perspective?
Well, absolutely. I think as people select cloud, they're very interested in not only how easy it is to get into the cloud, but how easy is it to move from cloud vendor to cloud vendor. And so there are a variety of ways to do that. The one we currently support is the Open Virtualization Framework. It's clearly the most broadly accepted framework for that type of migration of virtual machine loads from provider to provider.
And any chance of, I don't know whether this is Ash or for you, any chance of when we're looking at the movement that one forgets, there's still a few hurdles to cross even getting to the cloud? Have people got to look at everything at once?
They do. Certainly, what applications a customer would like to put into the cloud, what type of applications, from a performance point of view, security point of view, data management point of view, those are all important qualifications associated with how you want to introduce yourself to the cloud. Right. But at the end of the day, no matter what you introduce into the cloud, you're always going to want to have the ability to move it elsewhere as your needs require.
I mean, some of the people sometimes cast a stone, even at Cloud Expo, at a conference that's trying to really help drive something along that, you guys are selling soccer just like, here are the soccer cleats. You have to go and play this game called soccer. You're not explaining the rules. You haven't shown the size of the goalposts or whether it's, AstroTurf or real grass, whatever. And I'm interested here. Do you think people now, they understand what they're getting into with cloud computing? Are you comfortable with that at least? And now it's a question of, to the best provider. The race will be theirs?
No, I think it's still, again, forming, at the level of, migrating your apps to the cloud and running it in the cloud. I think there are some standards that are forming, and that layer has formed. Exactly. But if you look at the whole picture, you still have to, it's not about standalone silos. And that's a challenge we have in the area of SaaS too. These silos have to integrate with other applications too to provide value. And that area is the area that's being hashed out as we speak, and there are no standards for it. And the way we approach it as a platform vendor, we don't provide the service part. We partner with infrastructure as a service companies to do that. So with our platform, for example, or vendors like us, you can even grab what you're doing and run it on premise. You can move it from the cloud to your public cloud to private cloud or a hybrid form, or just, again, take it back to on-premise data centers. So at the middle layer, you have a freedom. If we separate the middleware vendor from the infrastructure vendor, that flexibility is going to be there.
Now, you introduced, dare I say it, the 3 most popular terms anywhere in cloud computing, which is going to prompt me, isn't it, to say, is that still the most useful typology? I'm going to throw this one to you, Andy. Public, private, hybrid, is that still the lens through which we should be viewing cloud computing?
I think every month that goes forward for this next year, the big dissection between open versus closed is becoming more visible.
More visible than that.
I'll use the example of Netflix. They were able to design from greenfield an application that ran exactly on the way Amazon chose to expose their environment. For them to be able to move that to another provider is potentially not even possible without an entire rewrite of that application. The concepts that are espoused by OpenStack, which we were a co-founder of, but now that's 180 firms building up technologies that work inside of this API accessible layer that will be stood up by multiple providers, should be a welcome opportunity for more of the world to understand what does open truly mean, and what did that lock-in really mean. No, I'm no longer committed to this hardware or this software, but I'm committed to the way my application works. That's the kind of lock-in people are finding out now that the cloud's been around for enough years and they actually get the choice. Can I be portable? Can I burst? No, if you find out you can't, you've just found your new age way to be locked in like you have for a couple decades.
Right. And can we take a straw poll? I mean, can you put up your hand if really we don't have to worry that really cloud computing is going to be open so soon that you don't have to worry about it? I mean, my hand's going up, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
5 out of 5?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so that's a reassuring thing if you're at home and you're still concerned about that. And then what would this hybrid, what do people even mean by that? Ash?
I think it's to be able to have some aspects of some of the applications running in your data centers, in your private cloud that you have virtualized, and some of them that are less sensitive, maybe from a security perspective or from a privacy perspective.
Or from data residency.
Exactly.
There's so many things.
To be able to put those in a public cloud, and when you combine those, then you have a hybrid approach. And again, you can take that concept to the middle layer, to the layer you use to integrate things and develop new applications also, to be able to run some components of it in your private cloud and some in a public cloud. And I think that's a cloud revolution. That's what's being missed. That's where we're going to end up. I think software is going to be built just like cars. It's going to have components, and those components, there's going to be a supply chain for those components. And cloud is going to enable that. And of course, we need new programming paradigms to do that. The existing paradigm is too introverted. It's not designed to go out and combine components from different vendors. Right. So those components also can be hybrid too. You can build some of the components yourself, use some business components from other vendors, and be able to rapidly assemble them just like a car and do it. So I think this concept of private, hybrid, and public is good, and it's useful for transitioning little by little to the cloud. And again, separating your data that's sensitive in terms of security and privacy from the data that's not, and be able to outsource that into a public cloud.
So let's back up a little then and try and nail that in Andy's terms. So what we're saying, if I understand correctly, is so yeah, you can go private or you can go public. What Andy's saying, the real issue, because we've seen people switch in both directions, I think, but we'll perhaps test that out later. So the real issue is that you can switch, not which you go with. Yeah, if you focus on the switchability, you maybe don't have to worry. I mean, what's the most famous example of somebody who's out on the public cloud who pulls back? Any takers?
Well, nothing jumps to mind.
Right, then the other way around.
people who are in private cloud who move to public cloud. That's a fairly common model.
Right.
You see that. You see that occur from many companies.
Yeah.
Because one of the issues, of course, is that if you're in private cloud, it certainly improves the things that cloud improves for you: flexibility, time to market, all of those things.
If you're private.
If you're private, but it doesn't help you with the cost part of this envelope. It does not help you with the reduction of the time you spend managing infrastructure. You just move it to cloud infrastructure, and so. Companies who first experiment with cloud privately, you very quickly want to move with pieces that they can, into public cloud, simply because you can get a much greater range of benefits from doing that.
Allyson, I'm sure you're asked not only by your children but by your neighbors. this whole cloud computing. I run a business. I've got IT. Actually, I haven't run into cloud computing yet, because this is still the case, right? There's still people catching up. What would you say? How do you explain to them what is actually involved in going out of a data center into the cloud? How do you address that?
I think that it ultimately gets to being able to capture the capacity of compute when you need it and where you need it, and delivering services when you need them to the right people.
So it's a scaling thing, a latency thing?
It's definitely a scaling thing, and it's an agility thing. Providing your organization the agility to meet their business requirements with IT when you need them, and not have to have the CapEx expenses to run that type of data center for your peak loads.
And is there a competitive advantage element where you say to people, I also ought to note that your main competitor is configured this way? I'm just saying, does that happen? I'm thinking it has to, right?
I think so. I think that the agility aspect of it is that you're going to meet the competitive requirements that your business needs. And to be able to stay ahead and to stay competitive, you absolutely need this type of flexibility within your IT operation. But it's going to take a while to get everybody to the point where they fully understand how cloud computing will adapt in their environments, that they're fully comfortable with public versus private, and how their balance in their organization is going to work. That's where we're here today to talk about.
I like what Andy said about it's amazing how you can be in an engagement and you never really get to hear about the nature of the data until as if it's like an afterthought. So maybe we ought to look at that for a moment. Are you assuming when you go into an engagement that company has already thought about what should go into the cloud and what shouldn't, or is that what they mostly need help with?
Think of the average Fortune 500 company. They have thousands of applications, and the average small business still has hundreds.
Yeah.
And so when a company like Rackspace says 60% of the Fortune 100 are clients, that may be for 10 of the applications, it might be for one, it might be for 100 of them. But there are so many different workloads, and getting a customer or business to embrace what is it that I want to consider. I have some knowledge about cloud that I've learned from A, B, and C vendors. Right. I want to hear your perspective so I get smarter, but then it's moving that conversation into, okay, some of your workloads absolutely can work perfectly on public cloud today. Some definitely cannot, and others are perfect for hybrid. So you get to that discussion, then okay, they're thinking in their mind, I have a level of trust or not trust with you, and I will share X, Y, and Z with you. So it's still a lot of pulling on the business to say, how much are you willing to share with me, so I can really know that using best cases and best practices, I can design for you the best solution today or tomorrow. So advisory services is still very key to the cloud knowledge and turning that into action and business.
I have this vision in my head of someone going to the dentist who refused to open his mouth. I'm just putting it out there. Same, Henry? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, and what makes this even more interesting is even the terms hybrid computing, public computing, community cloud, all of them are already starting to blur. You see a lot of gray area between them. So, for example, one of the things in the SHI cloud is that we will provide cloud appliances that would exist on the customer's site and the customer's data center. We still own them, we still manage them, but they exist on the customer's floor. And so is that hybrid cloud? Is that public cloud? Is that private cloud? It has elements of all three of those things in it. And as the technology continues to evolve, you'll see a continued blurring, not only in terms of the way it's offered, but the way it's consumed. And so the more transparent cloud becomes, the more you'll see different types of cloud interjected into different application deployment architectures simultaneously.
Here's a really simple question. What shouldn't go into the cloud? But that's not the big thing. What I'm interested in, because of the stage we're at, how does one then circumvent that and say, but that is not a negation of cloud computing. It's something specific. Is that just a technique that you've all learned? That it doesn't, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're not going to be moving that one anytime soon. But that's not because, how do you deal with that without it giving negative waves?
Well, like I use an example, Department of Energy, a nuclear site. High security.
It's got my attention. Yep.
Yeah, and and that's a good example that they don't want to migrate the particular application that's sensitive there to the cloud because the security is so important there, and nobody wants to take a chance there. Right. However, talking about enabling innovation that Allyson mentioned, we did the development using Amazon Cloud. Actually, most of the development happened on Amazon Cloud for this particular mobility project, and And it was fast. In an hour, we could bring up instances. The same thing would have took 3 weeks or 4 weeks to go to IT, internal IT, and say, provision a server for us there. And that's an example of something that you don't want to move, but still you can use cloud. There are many ways to benefit from the cloud and the agility that it brings, I think.
Okay, positive note. I like that. Henry? What shouldn't go there? Is there any type of thing? I like the nuclear example. That's a great one.
Well, there's certainly always going to be types of applications that a company is not going to want to move outside of their four walls, even if it's for just pure compliance reasons. So there are compliance and regulatory issues that simply prohibit customers from moving data outside of their four walls. It's actually one of the reasons we developed that cloud appliance that I spoke about earlier, simply so that when a customer has that requirement, they can still participate in cloud computing, but meet the requirement that the information not leave their four walls.
Allyson?
I think that the two gentlemen already tapped most of the areas. I think that what we're seeing customers doing is taking an inventory of those applications and looking at what are the most mission critical applications that provide risk in moving into the cloud. Maybe those are not the right targets. Regulatory concerns, definitely the ones that are ones that maybe not moving. And what are actually, on the flip side, what's going to give me a competitive advantage to move it to the cloud? If there's no competitive advantage today to move that to the cloud, perhaps that's something that stays behind within the private data center.
Andy, you introduced to this debate that big web, big IT. So now what about big data? Where does that fit in all of this? Big data is driving cloud computing. Is that going to be the next key driver or just one of many?
I think the stat goes something like in the last 48 hours, more data has been stored and digitized than in all of mankind until 2003. Something along those lines. It's mind-boggling. With that being the case, everywhere there's an application or anything that's grabbing data, the ability to do analytics on that is best performed nearest to wherever that application runs. So if that application is running in your corporate data center, the best place to do analytics on it is in the corporate data center. But as those applications decide where they're going to be in the future,
be close to it,
doing that analytics across a distributed open platform becomes important again, very much so.
So it's as simple as that. Be close to where you have it.
I don't think anything in big data is simple yet, and I don't think it's even fully understood or agreed yet. So that's still a big picture concept word, but at the end of the day, the data that we all have, we want to turn data into information and into action, and all of the tools that are being created are going to help us get there.
Big data a driver for SHI, Henry, at all?
It certainly is.
It catches the ear and the eye. Maybe that's a good thing.
Well, and there's certainly two types of big data. There's the publicly available big data, and so whether it's click data, all of the publicly available big data that routinely needs to be merged with large data sets from inside the company. And so it's really a combination of those two things that are of most use in the big data analytics space. The issue traditionally has been that it's only the Fortune 500 companies or so who can afford to do that internally, who could have the kind of infrastructure you need to want to acquire the big click data associated with that, merge it with your data. So one of the things that I see in the cloud, one of the things that we're looking at introducing at the end of this year, would be a source of the public data, which companies could then merge with their own data to provide big data analytics. That'll allow a lot of much smaller companies into this space and benefit from that combination of those two types of data.
Democratization of data.
Absolutely.
I just feel a whole new conference coming on.
One interesting thing I saw come out of Weather Channel, they just got a new CEO that came from Digitas and Akamai, who's got a very web background.
Right.
And he's now looking at the concept of saying whatever the weather is outside in wherever you're viewing whatever web application, that will influence influence the type of content and the visuals that are displayed to you. And so creating weather as an API that actually gets down into the localization of where you're at. The concept of what type of application could benefit from that it's inspiring. I love the concepts and where big data can go.
Yeah. That's going to need a lot of it. Now, that's a good example of what might be around over the horizon. Any other examples? Allyson, what do you use if you meet someone on the train and they say, wow, this whole cloud thing, where's it going? Any good examples of
I think that,
what we might see next?
one thing that we don't talk a lot about is just the growth of devices and the view of cloud from a user experience. You touched a little bit on it in terms of weather APIs, but just the personalization of the internet for the user, and the fact that the cloud is going to generate the back-end experience to make that happen. We're looking at your iPad here. Obviously, people are accessing information in all sorts of different ways, from digital signage to their PCs to their phones, and this will just continue to proliferate. And I think that having that personalized experience, where not only does your device know where you are, but has a history of exactly what your buying behaviors are, the types of information that you want to pull up, and that is unique to you. That's an exciting area of cloud to me.
Henry, the future?
Well, certainly, as we just talked about, I think big data is clearly the trend that will make enormous use out of cloud computing. The other thing that I think is important will be the development of a second-generation platform as a service capability. And so most platform as a service offerings today are really development platform as a service. And so conceptually, however, platform as a service, I think, would better serve the industry by really being the next complete level of abstraction from virtual machines, so that you don't have to develop an application specifically using that platform. That any enterprise application can be deployed on that second generation platform as a service. And so, if you think about it today, in infrastructure as a service space, we project virtual machines to the customer, but they still need to build an application deployment architecture from those. They still need to load middleware. They need to put together all of the things necessary for that to be a viable application deployment architecture. Ideally, you would like the platform as a service layer to do all that work for you, to look at a wrapper associated with the application that determines what are the requirements for that application, what are the middleware requirements for that application. Allow the layer to stand all that up, load the application, and then tune the application on an ongoing basis without any dependency on it being developed specifically for that platform, so that you can take any enterprise application and move it there. And so I think that, along with big data, I think true platform as a service will have an enormous impact in further abstracting the data center.
Well, Ash, you were the first one on the panel to flag PaaS, and it's come back to PaaS. So that seems to be the future also in your take.
Absolutely, I believe so too. And I think it starts with the explosion of APIs. The example with Weather Channel.
Yeah.
Same thing is happening with enterprise software, through the SOA web services actually. And in the consumer space, that's usually REST protocol. So there's an explosion of APIs starts from there, but I completely agree. So we need virtualization on top of this stack. So at the bottom of this stack, today we grab one hardware and make it look like many servers. One server, and we provision. That's what virtualization does for us. What we need to do is to grab many silos, many systems, and make them look like one system. And that's, I think, what the PaaS needs to do, to abstract all systems under a unified, universal building block. So then that's what's required, actually.
Does that very verb, does abstract and abstraction, does that worry the business?
Does it worry
line?
the business?
Yeah.
Not at all. Makes it
they don't fear that where's it gone?
No, I've described it as a Big Mac. The bun in the middle is the abstraction layer, so the grease from the top burger doesn't get to the one at the bottom.
That's the first description I've ever heard of cloud that way. I think that's a unique description.
Doing away with the dependencies is a wonderful thing. It's caused all the problems. It's caused the overspending in IT for years. I think abstraction is a wonderful thing for the future of IT.
Well, I have to say, that hamburger notion has spurred a little game. In Jeremy's mind that we ought to play. Now, there are analogies.
See what you started?
There are analogies. I quite like that hamburger one. I was thinking I'm going to say something like that cloud computing is Well, then we'll do the famous one. Cloud computing is like teenage sex. You must have heard that one. We always have that one. What is it? It goes, I've heard it in different ways, but let's go, everybody talks about it, not so many people doing it, and hardly anyone getting it right. That's sort of be my teenage sex analogy. So that's cloud computing. I wonder who could have a go at a new analogy for cloud computing. Ash, could you have a go at it?
Well, I don't have a new one, but I think the
an
old
good one.
The old good one, the utility computing, the thing that defined the term utility computing and was electricity. Right?
Very
so
good.
today every IT is like having its own generator. Cloud is about how electricity works today. There is generation, central generation that provides power to the grid to everybody else. So unless you're a hospital or a fire department, you don't need to have your own generator. And also the way you pay for it. You pay for what you use in electricity on a meter. They precisely measure what you use and you pay for it. We're not happy about paying for it, but we have to. And it costs to deliver electricity to us. So I think that's the perfect analogy. Ultimately, that's ultimately where cloud computing is going to go.
Perfect analogy, though.
It's an old one.
It's going to come from Henry.
I think so.
What are you thinking? Henry, I mean, this electricity thing, old hat, right? But it does still work. It's very good. You unpacked it nicely. It still works.
So I'm not so sure it's an analogy as it is a slogan, but cloud will set IT free. And so I mentioned earlier that this concept of the expectation gap. And that corporate IT is falling behind in that race. There is increasing numbers of young people entering the workforce who have very different expectations about how easy IT is to use. And so when you think about it, over the years we've spent increasing amounts of time designing, managing, implementing, and managing infrastructure. And what's most interesting about that is the one thing that an IT shop does not get any credit for is designing, implementing, and managing infrastructure. The only time you ever get credit for that is when the infrastructure stops working, and then you get negative credit. But when the infrastructure is doing what it's supposed to do, you get no credit for it at all. And so we spend most of our time in IT doing something we get no credit for.
Sounds like parenting. What was that?
Yes, well, there's probably and so I think the concept of cloud setting IT free is that by eliminating the burden and the drudgery of dealing with infrastructure, that time, all the time and hours done with that, can now be placed into improving the user experience inside corporate IT, so that not only can it match what people are seeing, in the public sources, but return to its traditional role, which is really to provide a better experience.
Setting IT free. That's going to be hard to beat, I'm afraid.
I know. I had one and I was like, I think I'm ready, but now it's tough. I was thinking about it in terms of you're used to swimming in a swimming pool and you find yourself in an ocean. There may be some perils that you're not used to. The size and currents might be something that might confuse you for a while, but the places you can go once you understand exactly where you're at.
Sharks?
Maybe some sharks.
Just saying.
And you never know what's beneath you, right?
Used to a swimming pool, now it's an ocean. Andy?
I think cloud is like Legos. It's being learned by every child that comes up. They get skills. Some choose to go other ways, but as they grow up, there's adults that choose to master these skills and stay current on the whole thing. The wonderful thing about Legos, they used to sell them just in a kit of 20, and people would come up with great creations. Now there's an ecosystem of prescribing, defining, the only thing you can build with this set that I bought is exactly this. There's clouds that are going all different directions, but it's being learned by everyone from
Do you know what the really good news is? My wife's Danish. The one thing I know about is Lego. Do you know what they're now doing? They've returned to the basics because the growth is in that freedom. So that perhaps takes it full circle. Openness and freeing IT. I'm not sure that we can dissect cloud computing any better than the four of you have done. So I really think we should let the world get on and say thank you to Ash Massoudi from NextAxiom, to Henry Fastert from SHI International. Thank you, Allyson Klein from Intel and wearing her Open Data Center Alliance hat. And thank you, Andy Schroepfer from Rackspace. And let's meet again, well, who knows, because clearly cloud is not gone yet. So thank you,
Thank
the
you.
four of
Thank
you.
you.
And
Thank you, Jeremy.
thank you for watching this out there on the World Wide Web. This is Jeremy Geelan for SYS-CON TV saying there'll be more cloud shortly.